Homage to the Triple Gem. So warm greetings, everybody. This is Bhanthe Joe, and still here, Vasa, at Gendagala Aranya, and was asked a really interesting question actually just today, which was that the Buddha said not to chase after the past, basically not to go after the past or to go after the future, but that one should practice more or less staying in the present moment. And the question was, how does one practice in the present moment with regards to the 5 khandas? So there's a really beautiful sutta called the Bhagyawathun Sutta, in which the Buddha describes not chasing after the past and not kind of running towards the future, and also not being taken in by the present. So chasing after the past, it basically means thinking back to the past and delighting in it, like, oh, my past was like this, and my body, my thoughts, my feelings, they were like this in the past. Or thinking in the future, I'm going to have this body, this feelings, this form, whatever. Basically, I'm going to have a future like this. So one kind of delights in the past or delights in the future. And in this way, one is deluded, because the past is rarely what we remember it to be, and the future rarely turns out exactly the way that one plans or thinks or imagines it will be, and one often forgets what one's imaginings were. So when one is living in this way, kind of with regard to the 5 khandas, deluded about what they were like in the past, and also deluded about what they will be like in the future, it's very difficult to let go of one's attachment to them in the present moment. Is one thinks it's worthwhile to hang on to the future will be really good, or based on what one had in the past, one builds up this delusion about what the future will be like, or what the present should be like or could be like in the near future. And as a result, it makes essentially living in the world, living in samsara, worth doing. It makes life worth living. That phrase doesn't actually, that phrase usually refers to something more extreme. But in the Buddhist context, it makes being reborn worth doing. It makes life worth living again and again and again, if these 5 khandas are something that's worthwhile to hang on to. So it's a very funny thing about memory. I remember when I was a young monk, or sorry, not a young monk, a young man, I would be like a young man in like grade 6 or 7, and I'd be remembering with nostalgia. I mean, we even have this word, nostalgia. I'd be remembering back to like grade 5, which was like 2 years earlier at that time. And you have this memories that you were doing the same thing. And people go through their life doing the same thing, having this nostalgia about what the past was like. The past was so great. And usually what happens is that people have a very limited memory of what the past was actually like. They often remember something to the exclusion of the whole picture. They remember that really nice afternoon that one had, but they don't remember that they were worried about the exam or worried about the test. They don't remember that things that one takes for granted that one has been successful in the present were uncertain at that time. They were a worry, a cause of fear at that time, a cause of uncertainty. They don't know that things in the past that one was thinking were safe and secure then fell away and one had to suffer from them. So the actual experience of what it's like to be in the past is rare. What it was like in the past is rarely reflected in the way that a person remembers it. Oftentimes one's memories are tainted by nostalgia, they're tainted by a delusion. And similarly with the future, it usually goes in one of 2 directions. It can go in the direction of fear, in which case one tries to ward off a terrible future, which is not necessarily a bad thing in all cases, but needs to be done with balance. Or it goes in the direction that the future is going to be this really, really great thing, that one will have these types of memories, these types of perceptions, etc. in the future. And for that reason, it's really, really worth going to the future. What this is it's a subtle attachment to the 5 khandas. So again, one will not be able to let them go. So in terms of attending to the 5 khandas in the present, the Buddha also says not to get taken in the present moment. And this is when a person in the sutta, in the Bhagyawathun Sutta, it says that they think that form is self, or the self is in form, or the form possesses self, or the self possesses form. These kind of I don't always get those right, but just to paraphrase, those 4 ways in which a person establishes a self-identity view based on any one of the 5 khandas, based on their form, their feelings, their perception, their consciousness. And this just basically means everything. So the Buddha is brilliant in that he breaks it into these categories that a person can easily contemplate. But if there's ever a sense in the present moment, that one has a conceiving that there's something that's permanent, that's eternal, that has these characteristics, that's really who I am, then that is getting caught, it's getting taken in by the present moment. So, in order to counter these things, the Buddha teaches the 4 satipatthanas in order to attend skillfully in the present moment. And the interesting thing is that these satipatthanas, they can go both into the past and into the future. So sati in the Buddha's teachings, it's related to the Sanskrit word smriti, which means, I might be pronouncing that wrong, which means memory in Sanskrit. So he defines it in terms of the faculty of sati, in terms of we've got these 5 faculties, faith and, mindfulness, and, there's 5, faith, mindfulness, effort, concentration, and discernment. And this faculty of sati is one in which one has the ability to recollect things that happened far into the past, but also it's one in which one is remaining focused on the 4 frames of reference, the 4 satipatthanas, the body and feelings, mind and mind objects. So it's interesting that the word for focusing on, in that satipatthana formula where the Buddha says that the way to use sati, the faculty of sati, is remaining focused on these 4 satipatthanas. Focused on is basically this word anupassana. Anupassana, one of the more literal ways that it can be translated, is like observing or like following after. So if anybody's, ever tried to practice meditation, like following the breath, watching the breath, you're essentially following after it. You're observing it, but you're also following it. Wherever it moves, whichever way it goes, you're trying to match your recollection, trying to match your mindfulness is the word that they use, which is a pretty accurate word, to wherever this thing is moving to whatever, wherever the breath is doing, one is trying to match it there. And at the same time, delusion creeps in this way as well. If there's a gap where one loses it, then delusion creeps in, and one can be off to the future, one can be off to the past, delighting in the past, or delighting in what might be in the future, feeling afraid of it, or whatever it might be. So the faculty of sati keeps these things in mind. They use the phrase, the 4 satipatthanas are the body, again, feelings, mind, and mind objects. They say the body in and of itself, or the Buddha says the body in and of itself, feelings in and of themselves, mind in and of itself, or mind objects in and of itself. It's literally like the body in the body. So the Pali grammar, they have different cases. It's not like English where they have like a preposition and they'll put like on, and you'll say like on or in, or whatever it might be. They have a case that indicates that. So this locative case indicates like on or in or referring to, like with reference to. Like if it's a locative case, it's in that, it's on it, it's in it, it's referring to it. That's another way that it can be interpreted. So one refers to the body in and of itself, or the body in and of itself, without referencing it to something larger, like subsuming it under the world. So the world thinks, is the body beautiful? Is it not beautiful? So you don't have that as your frame of reference, what the world thinks about the body. You've got the body in and of itself. And the Buddha goes on to define the ways that you can do that are in line with the Dhamma. You can focus in on the breath, and gives a standard anapanasati formula. You can keep track of the body as it moves around. That's what they call sati sampajana. You can think about it in terms of its decay, the way that it falls apart and decays. You can think about it in terms of its internal elements, how it's disgusting. And when you have these as your frame of reference, then that is how you view the body in relationship to whatever comes up in a person's life in the present. So another person, usually if a person, we see somebody and they either somebody thinks that a person's body is either attractive or unattractive, they get affected by that. This is when one has the frame of reference of the world in mind. It's like, well, what's the world think about me? And how can I derive more sensual pleasures in the future? This is what people think sometimes. How can I derive more sensual pleasures in the future from the world? So with this kind of thing in mind, one suffers when somebody says something bad about the body, or one gets elated when somebody says something good about the body. So the Buddha has us take our mind away from that frame of reference in the present moment, and instead of that, whatever comes into contact with the body, one should have one of these descriptions of the way to attend to this satipatthana in the sutta as one's frame of reference, keeping it in mind, sati. One keeps that in mind, and one refers to it that way. So somebody says, "Oh, you look like very healthy, or you look very, fit," something like this. It's a praise or a compliment to the body. Well, one can think, well, that's good that I have this, fitness. If my body is feeling good, then I can use it to practice. But you can also imagine how the body will deteriorate eventually. So it's not good to become overly lustful towards one's own body, thinking it's beautiful. And it's also not good to get too obsessed with maintaining the body, making it fit, making it strong, making it really buff so that the world appreciates it. One maintains the body for the sake of practice, and that's all. So that you can say that's all. One maintains it for that sake, for the sake of practice. One takes food and nourishment for that sake. So the Buddha, when he talks about developing sati, says sati, sampajana, and atapi. Basically, just paraphrasing, these are the three qualities that one brings to bear on an experience. So sati, it's the one that remembers things, keeps things in mind. Sampajana is this alertness of like what is actually happening in the present moment. And atapi, that one goes to the future because it's concerned with whether or not we're going to be developing good or bad qualities in the future. So you take whatever frame of reference it is, whether it's the body or feelings or the mind, and again, we're not going to go through the whole Satipatthana Sutta here. I'd have to review it anyways to do a good job, but we're not going to go through the whole thing. But essentially, you take the frames of reference and the instructions that the Buddha has given with regard to these frames of reference, and you try to see the world in that way in the present moment. This is how you abandon. This is how one abandons lust and passion for the khandas in the future, for the khandas that one had in the past, and also for the khandas that are in the present moment, the 5 khandas. A short way of saying reality, of saying the whole world. One can abandon the whole world in the past, the future, or the present by attending to these things carefully such that this passion arises. So we've got these qualities. We've got sati, which technically goes to the past, but also keeps things in mind in the present or pertaining to the future. You've got sampajana, being alert to what's happening in the present, and you've got atapi, wanting to abandon unskillful qualities and develop skillful ones in both the present and the future. You can't do it in the past. So attending to these frames of reference actually goes in all 3 directions. So the Buddha in the Bhagyawathun Sutta didn't say don't necessarily don't think about the past or don't think about the future or don't think about the present. He said basically don't get caught up in these things. Don't have passion and delight for the future, passion and delight for the past, or get taken in by the present. Essentially having passion and delight for the aggregates, for all of reality in the present moment. So in a sense, it is true that one could say on a more profound level, if one wants to attain nibbana, that's timeless. It's beyond the past, present, and future. But in terms of practicing for that goal, one has to attend to the past, the present, and the future in the right way. So it sounds quite complicated, and these satipatthana. The Satipatthana formula, Jnana-Dipa Bhante actually made this really excellent point that this is another one of the complete teachings of the Buddha. It's essentially another way to break down all of reality. So we've got the khandas, we've got the six internal and external faculties, and we have these the Satipatthanas. So these are ways of breaking down all of reality. In the case of the Satipatthanas, it more takes reality and says what to focus on in reality so that whatever aspect of reality one encounters, one attends to it in a right way, basically with yoniso manasikara, so that with the appropriate attention, so that defilements do not arise in the present and they don't arise in the future. So that basically one can move forwards towards nibbana. Now, it sounds complicated about this, as if we were to try to draw out a map. Okay, what's atapi? What's sampajana? Okay, what's sati? And how does this link up with form? And wait, what were all the Buddha's instructions for form? And then what were his instructions for feeling? And what were instructions for mind? What were all the lists of the different dhammas, the mental qualities that I'm to attend to? It can be kind of difficult. Essentially, what one does in one's practice is there's a very good sutta, a very important sutta, it's a simile of the cook, in which the Buddha describes taking up a meditation practice, basically knowing what the theme of one's mind is. The theme of one's mind basically being what it is, the way in which one can practice such that skillful qualities arise, such that one's mind settles down, such that wholesome qualities are generated. It's essentially whatever theme one takes up that suits one's mind well for the abandoning of unwholesome and the development of the wholesome. So the Buddha uses a simile of food. So a skilled cook watches what their master takes. If they take more salty food, they give them more salty and they get rewarded with wages. Or they take more sweet, they take more sour, whatever it might be. In the same way, a bhikkhu who's skilled in meditation attends to the theme of their mind, the citta nimitta. And as a result of basically attending skillfully to that theme, they're rewarded with a pleasant abiding here and now. So in other words, the basic instruction is to know what type of kammatthana, what type of practice works best for you for abandoning the defilements. And the Buddha has given so many different ways to practice meditation, so many different ways to direct the mind. And actually, meditators tend to find that it's usually two topics that they change from time to time throughout a meditator's lifetime, but it's usually two topics that actually cover quite a lot of the defilements that arise in a person's mind. You can't say for the whole path, but let's say for a chunk of time in their life, at that particular time in their life. So the way one finds these things out is basically by experimenting with them, like a person experiments with food. Eventually one gets a sixth sense, or not a sixth sense, an intuitive sense, one could say. It's informed by the other senses of what food is healthy for one and what food is not healthy for one. One comes to know sour food doesn't agree with me, this doesn't agree with me. I've found here that in Sri Lanka, just the smell of a certain type of mushroom doesn't agree with me, even, let alone tasting it. I have this kind of allergy to a particular type of mushroom that's here. So in the same way, as one tests out one's meditation practice, as one actually tries to develop the wholesome and abandon the unwholesome, then one gets a sense, given one's strengths, given the various faculties that one has, the strengths and whatever faculties one has, what topic, what theme of the mind is usually successful for abandoning those things. And then one bases one's efforts on the things that one is strong in to develop the things that one is weak in. This is another point from the suttas. So if one finds that when one practices anapanasati in a particular way, the mind settles down, one's defilements are abandoned, one has more ability when one stops practicing anapanasati to determine what thoughts come in that are good and bad and to stop them in time, it's a good topic. If one finds that that's kind of halfway the case or 3/4 of the way the case, it's a good topic still, but one may find that another topic is even more beneficial. And usually the way that it works out for people is they tend to have one, what we might call, for lack of a better word, samatha topic, a topic that one is just mainly focusing on that topic without doing much thinking. And one, what we would, for lack of a better word, vipassana topic. In the canon, they're often called sanya topics. These topics where one is developing perceptions, the perception of anicca, the perception of asubha, various perceptions that the Buddha recommends. So with these topics in mind, these become one's frame of reference. So as one goes through the world, one has these topics in one's mind, and keeping these topics in one's mind in the present, however one interacts with the world, these meditation topics, we call the theme of one's mind that one accurately picks up, that becomes the way that one interacts with the world. So one's interactions with the world go from being in a mode where one is basically chasing after the future for the sake of delight in the future, or hankering, having nostalgia about the past for how great it was, or remorse about the past, not wanting it to be that way, or fear of the future, being pushed and pulled by these things, to one where whatever presently arisen phenomena, the Buddha says Dhamma, whatever basic Dhamma I think is the word, comes up in the mind, one attends to that skillfully, using the satipatthanas, using the frames of reference that are appropriate for one to abandon the unwholesome and develop the wholesome. So in other words, one has sati, one is keeping that frame of reference in mind, developing the theme of one's mind mindfully, not letting it slip away. One has sampajana, one is alert to what one's doing in the present moment. Although one may be thinking about the future, and one thinking about what the future is, one is alert to that. One isn't just lost in a kind of fantasy. And then one has atapi, one is doing these things for a purpose so that one can grow in wholesome qualities. So though it sounds very complex, essentially what it involves is one testing it out, learning what one's defilements are, and then learning what themes, what topics are appropriate to apply to defeat those defilements. And again, everybody has different personalities, so the main defilements for one person are different than the main defilements for another. The main good qualities for one person are different from the main good qualities for another. So the Buddha's path in this way is a path that self-destructs. Essentially, the khandas, they're all of reality. So don't attend to them with delight in the future, don't attend to them with delight in the past, and don't get taken in the present. But because all these things, khandas, they encompass all of reality, all of conditioned things, basically, the Buddha teaches us through the satipatthana formulas, through the satipatthanas, and how to attend to these things, how to take this reality and manipulate it so that it becomes a factor for the undoing of attachment to it. So in other words, it's a path that self-destructs. We develop the path for the sake of abandoning things. And in the end, we even abandon the path. So some of the ajahns, they describe going through their practice and the grosser forms of attachment, especially related to the body, are the first ones that one has to let go. And we can't say that like as a carte blanche, but in general, one's attachment to the body is overcome at anagami, one's attachment to lust. Lust is bound up with a person's body, basically. It's kind of one's body and other people's bodies. Lust first starts with one's own bodies and extends to other people. So that's form in the khandas. And also one will be working with the other khandas as well. Feelings, the worries, the anxiety, one could call that sankharas, whatever, a mix of feelings and sankharas, however one wants to break that up. And perceptions, but one will be working with these various anxieties or worries or hatred, whatever kind of emotions come up into the mind. One is working with those as one develops the path to try to both make one's mind calm and develop dispassion through whatever some vipassana topics are suitable for the theme of the mind. So as the path progresses, it's at the end that basically the past and the future have more or less been abandoned. Delight for them has been abandoned. And it's basically attachment to the present moment that remains, especially through some of the most subtle khandas. Apparently consciousness is one of the most subtle ones. So at the end, one even abandons attachment to consciousness itself. And at that point, one goes beyond essentially the present moment. One goes beyond time in a permanent way. So this is perhaps one of the deeper ways in which one could take the Dhamma to be a kaliko. So one attends to the five khandas in such a way that one learns to let them go through the satipatthana formulation. One doesn't chase after the future, one doesn't chase after the past, and one doesn't get taken in the present. And this is a factor for development, this is a way of development. But the path is one that self-destructs. So one pulls one's attachments away until they're more or less become more and more centralized into a smaller and smaller area. At the end, basically, the present moment, basically consciousness remains, is the way that some ajahns seem to describe it. So to become an arahant, one has to even go beyond that. So there can be deeper meanings to these things, not chasing after the past, the future, or the present, to find something that's beyond time entirely. And the Buddha has given instructions to do this, so long as we follow his instructions well, so long as we keep the frames of reference in mind properly, then we can set our feet on a path that leads towards something timeless, that leads towards something deathless, that leads towards a state of mind in which suffering cannot touch one. Okay, so I think leave that for reflection, and wishing everybody all the blessings of Dhamma practice.